Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel English Avenue. Today we are going to learn the history of Britain. This is not only the story of kings and queens. This is the story of tribes, warriors, Romans, castles, invasions, religion, language, power, empire, war, industry, and modern change. Britain may look like a small island on the map, but its history changed the whole world. Its language, English, became one of the most spoken languages on Earth. Its ideas, laws, literature, politics, inventions, navy, and empire influenced many countries. So if you want to understand the modern world, you should understand the history of Britain. In this video, we will start from the very beginning. We will learn how ancient people lived in Britain. We will understand how the Romans came. We will see how Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, and Normans changed the land. And slowly, we will understand how Britain became one of the most powerful nations in history. Watch this video till the end, because every chapter will help you understand how a small island became a powerful force in world history. And if you are learning English, this video will also help you practice. Listen carefully. Repeat useful sentences. Learn powerful words like invasion, kingdom, empire, civilization, monarchy, parliament, revolution, industry, and freedom. This is not only a history lesson. This is also English practice with a powerful story. So, like this video, subscribe to this channel, and keep learning simple English with interesting knowledge. Chapter 1. Ancient Britain and the Roman Age. The history of Britain begins thousands of years ago, long before cities, long before castles, long before kings and queens, long before the English language. In the beginning, Britain was a land of forests, rivers, hills, animals, and small human communities. Early people came to Britain during the Stone Age. They lived by hunting animals, collecting food, fishing, and using simple stone tools. Their life was difficult. There were no modern houses, no roads, no schools, no hospitals, no machines, no written books. They had to survive with nature. They followed the seasons. They moved for food. They made tools from stone, bone, and wood. Slowly, human life began to change. People learned farming. This was a very big change in history. When people learned farming, they did not need to move all the time. They started living in one place. They grew crops. They kept animals. They built small villages. This was the beginning of settled life in Britain. One of the most famous ancient monuments in Britain is Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a circle of huge stones in southern England. It was built thousands of years ago. Even today, people still ask, how did ancient people move these heavy stones? Why did they build it? Was it used for religion? Was it connected to the sun? Was it used for ceremonies? Stonehenge shows us that ancient people were not simple-minded. They had beliefs. They had planning. They had knowledge of seasons, sky, and stone building. They were trying to understand life, death, nature, and the universe. Later, Britain entered the Bronze Age and Iron Age. People learned to use metals. First bronze, then iron. Metal tools were stronger than stone tools. Farming became better. Weapons became stronger. Communities became more organized. During the Iron Age, Celtic tribes lived in Britain. The Celts were not one single united country. They were many different tribes. They had chiefs. They had warriors. They had farmers. They had religious leaders called druids. They lived in hill forts and small settlements. They made metal weapons, jewelry, and tools. They had their own culture, stories, and beliefs. The Celts were brave and independent. But they were divided. Different tribes had different leaders. This division later made it easier for a powerful foreign empire to enter Britain. That empire was Rome. The Roman Empire was one of the greatest empires in ancient history. Rome controlled huge areas of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. The Romans had strong armies. They built roads. They built cities. They created laws. They collected taxes. They controlled trade. They were organized, disciplined, and powerful. In 43 AD, the Romans invaded Britain. The Roman army came with trained soldiers, weapons, armor, and military planning. Some British tribes fought against them. One of the most famous leaders who resisted Rome was Queen Boudica. Boudica was the queen of the Iceni tribe. She led a major rebellion against Roman rule. Her story became a symbol of courage and resistance. But in the end, the Romans defeated the rebellion. Britain became part of the Roman Empire. Roman rule changed Britain deeply. The Romans built towns and cities. They built roads across the land. They built forts, walls, baths, temples, markets, and government buildings. One of the most famous Roman structures in Britain was Hadrian's Wall. It was built in the north of England. The purpose was to defend the Roman province and control movement. Roman Britain became more connected, organized, and urban. Cities like Londinium, which later became London, grew during the Roman period. The Romans brought new ideas of law, trade, writing, money, architecture, and city life. But Roman rule did not affect everyone in the same way. Some people lived in Roman-style towns. Some lived in villas. Some became connected to Roman trade and government. But many ordinary people still lived in villages and worked on farms. Roman influence was strong, but Britain was still a mixed society. For almost 400 years, Rome ruled Britain. But then the Roman Empire became weak. It faced attacks, political problems, economic trouble, and pressure from different groups. Rome could no longer protect all its lands. Around the early 5th century, Roman rule in Britain ended. Roman soldiers left. Britain was no longer protected by the powerful Roman army. This created a new problem. Who would control Britain now? The Roman age left Britain with roads, towns, walls, and memories of empire. But after Rome left, Britain entered a new and uncertain period. New people would arrive, new kingdoms would rise, new languages would grow, and slowly, the foundations of England would begin. Chapter 2: Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, and the Norman Conquest. After the Romans left Britain, the land became unstable. There was no strong Roman army. There was no single ruler controlling everything. Different local leaders tried to protect their people and control their areas. This period is sometimes called the early medieval period. It was a time of change, movement, conflict, and new identity. Soon, new groups came to Britain from Northern Europe. They included the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. Together, they are often called the Anglo-Saxons. They came from areas that are now part of Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Some came as warriors, some came as settlers, some came with families. They settled in different parts of Britain and slowly created new kingdoms. This was a very important moment in British history, because the Anglo-Saxons helped shape the early identity of England. In fact, the word England comes from Angleland, meaning the land of the Angles. The English language also began to develop from the languages of these Germanic peoples. So when we talk about the history of English, we must remember the Anglo-Saxons. Their language became Old English. Old English was very different from modern English, but it was the beginning of the English language. The Anglo-Saxons built villages. They farmed the land. They created kingdoms. They had warriors, kings, laws, and traditions. Over time, several Anglo-Saxon kingdoms became powerful. Some famous kingdoms were Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, and East Anglia. These kingdoms often fought with each other. Britain was not united. Power moved from one kingdom to another. During this time, Christianity also became very important. Christian missionaries came to Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. One famous mission came from Rome in 597 AD, led by Augustine. He became connected with Canterbury, which later became an important Christian center. Christianity changed Anglo-Saxon Britain. It influenced education, writing, art, law, and culture. Monasteries became centers of learning. Religious people copied books by hand. They preserved knowledge. They taught reading and writing. So Christianity played a major role in the development of Britain's culture. But then another powerful force arrived: the Vikings. The Vikings came from Scandinavia, mainly from areas that are now Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. They were sailors, traders, explorers, and warriors. They used strong ships that could travel across seas and rivers. At first, Viking attacks were sudden and terrifying. They attacked monasteries, villages, and towns. One famous Viking attack happened in 793 AD at Lindisfarne, a monastery in northern England. This attack shocked the Christian world. The Vikings did not only raid, many of them also settled. They took land, they built communities, they influenced language, trade, and law. Parts of England came under Viking control. This area became known as the Danelaw. The Anglo-Saxons had to fight hard against Viking expansion. One of the most famous Anglo-Saxon kings was Alfred the Great of Wessex. Alfred fought against the Vikings and helped protect his kingdom. He was not only a warrior king, he also supported education, law, and learning. He understood that a kingdom needed more than soldiers. It needed knowledge. It needed organization. It needed strong leadership. Alfred's efforts helped keep Anglo-Saxon power alive. Over time, the idea of a more united England began to grow. Different kingdoms slowly came together under stronger kings. But the Viking influence did not disappear. Vikings and Anglo-Saxons mixed in many areas. Their languages, cultures, and communities influenced each other. Britain was becoming a place shaped by many peoples: Celtic roots, Roman memories, Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, Christian faith, Viking settlement. All these layers became part of British history. Then came one of the biggest turning points in British history: the year 1066. In 1066, King Edward the Confessor died without a clear child heir. This created a fight for the English throne. Several men claimed they had the right to become king. One of them was Harold Godwinson, an English nobleman. He became King Harold II. But another man also wanted the throne: William, Duke of Normandy from northern France. William believed the English throne should be his. So he prepared an invasion. In 1066, William crossed the English Channel with an army. King Harold had already faced another invasion in the north. Then he had to march south quickly to fight William. The two armies met at the Battle of Hastings. This battle changed British history forever. King Harold was defeated and killed. William won. He became known as William the Conqueror. This event is called the Norman Conquest. The Norman conquest changed England deeply. The Normans brought French-speaking rulers. They built castles to control the land. They changed the system of power. They gave land to Norman nobles. They changed law, government, architecture, and society. The English ruling class became French-speaking for a long time. This also changed the English language. Old English mixed with Norman French. Over time, this helped create Middle English. That is why modern English has many words from French. For example, words connected to government, law, food, power, and culture often have French influence. The Normans also created one of the most famous records in English history, the Domesday Book. It was a detailed survey of land and property. William wanted to know who owned what, how much land existed, and how much tax could be collected. This shows how organized Norman rule became. The Norman conquest was not just a change of king. It was a change of culture, language, power, and identity. After 1066, England became more connected to Europe, especially France. Castles rose across the land. Feudal society became stronger. Kings became more powerful. Nobles controlled land. Peasants worked the land. The church remained very important. This period created the foundation for medieval England. Chapter 3. Medieval Britain, Magna Carta, Tudors, and the Rise of Parliament. After the Norman conquest, England changed forever. The Normans brought castles, French-speaking rulers, stronger kings, and a new system of power. But history did not stop there. After 1066, Britain entered the medieval age. This was the age of castles, knights, kings, queens, church power, wars, rebellion, disease, and the slow rise of Parliament. Medieval Britain was not a peaceful place. Kings wanted more power. Nobles wanted more land. The church had strong influence. Ordinary people worked hard and lived difficult lives. Most people were farmers. They lived in villages. They worked on land owned by lords. Life was short, simple, and often painful. There were no modern hospitals, no modern medicine, no electricity, no machines, no easy transport. If crops failed, people could go hungry. If disease spread, many could die. But even in this difficult world, Britain was slowly developing. Towns grew, trade increased, cathedrals were built, universities began, laws became more organized, and kings started learning one hard lesson. Even a king could not rule alone forever. One of the most important moments in British history happened in 1215. This was the signing of Magna Carta. Magna Carta means Great Charter. It was signed by King John after powerful nobles rebelled against him. King John had become unpopular because of heavy taxes, failed wars, and harsh rule. The nobles wanted limits on the king's power, so they forced him to agree to Magna Carta. At that time, Magna Carta mainly protected the rights of powerful nobles. It did not create full democracy. It did not give equal rights to all people. But its importance became much bigger over time. Why? Because Magna Carta introduced a powerful idea. The king is not above the law. This idea changed history. Before this, many kings acted like their word was everything. But Magna Carta helped develop the belief that rulers must also follow law. This idea later influenced parliament, rights, justice, and even modern democracy. So Magna Carta was not the end of power struggles, but it was a beginning of limiting absolute power, a beginning of questioning authority, a beginning of saying, no ruler should have unlimited control. Later, England also became involved in long wars with France. One major conflict was the 100 Years' War. This war was not exactly 100 years of non-stop fighting, but it lasted from the 14th to the 15th century. English kings claimed rights to the French throne. This created many battles between England and France. War brought pride, suffering, taxes, and political tension. At the same time, Britain faced something even more terrible: the Black Death. In the 1300s, a deadly disease spread across Europe. It killed millions of people. Britain also suffered badly. Villages lost many families. Workers died. Farms were abandoned. Society was shaken. But the Black Death also changed the economy. Because so many workers died, labor became more valuable. Surviving workers started demanding better wages and better conditions. This created tension between rich landowners and ordinary workers. So even tragedy created change. History is often like this. Painful events break old systems. Then new systems slowly begin. After this, England entered another major conflict: the Wars of the Roses. This was a power struggle between two noble families, the House of Lancaster and the House of York. Both wanted the English throne. Their symbols were roses. Lancaster was linked with the red rose. York was linked with the white rose. These wars created years of conflict, betrayal, battles, and changing kings. Finally, Henry Tudor defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. Henry Tudor became King Henry VII. This began the Tudor dynasty. The Tudor period is one of the most famous periods in British history. Why? Because during this time, England changed in powerful ways. The Tudor kings and queens made the monarchy stronger. They reduced the power of rebellious nobles. They improved government control. They supported exploration. They changed religion. And they helped prepare England for a bigger role in the world. One of the most famous Tudor kings was Henry VIII. Henry VIII is remembered for many reasons. He had 6 wives. He wanted a male heir. He broke away from the authority of the Pope in Rome. And he created a major religious change in England. This event is called the English Reformation. Before Henry VIII, England was a Catholic country under the religious authority of the Pope. But Henry VIII wanted control over the church in England, so he created the Church of England. This was a huge change. Religion was not only about belief, it was connected to politics, land, money, power, and identity. The Reformation changed churches. It changed law. It changed education. It changed family life. It changed people's relationship with religion and government. After Henry VIII, religion continued to create conflict. Some rulers supported Protestantism. Some wanted Catholicism. People suffered because of religious divisions. This shows us one important truth. In history, religion and politics were often deeply connected. Then came Queen Elizabeth I. She became one of the most famous rulers in British history. Elizabeth ruled from 1558 to 1603. Her time is often called the Elizabethan Age. During her rule, England became more confident. English literature grew. William Shakespeare wrote during this period. Theater became popular. Exploration increased. England's navy became stronger. And in 1588, England faced a huge threat from Spain. Spain sent a powerful fleet called the Spanish Armada. The goal was to invade England. But the English navy, helped by weather and strategy, defeated the Armada. This victory became a symbol of English strength. It gave England confidence as a sea power. This was important because later, sea power helped Britain build a global empire. After Elizabeth died, the Tudor line ended. Then came the Stuart kings. The Stuart period brought another major struggle: the fight between the king and Parliament. Parliament was becoming more important. It represented nobles, landowners, and later more sections of society. It controlled taxes, and kings needed money for wars and government. But some kings believed they had a divine right to rule. They believed God gave them power, and people should obey them. This created conflict. The biggest conflict came under King Charles I. Charles I fought with Parliament over money, religion, and power. Finally, the conflict turned into the English Civil War. This was a war between supporters of the king and supporters of Parliament. The king's supporters were called royalists. Parliament's supporters were called parliamentarians. This war was not only about politics. It was about one big question: who should have the final power? The king or Parliament? In the end, Parliament's army won. Charles I was captured, put on trial, and executed in 1649. This was shocking. A king was killed by his own people through a political trial. For a short time, England became a republic under Oliver Cromwell. There was no king, but after Cromwell's death, the monarchy returned in 1660. This was called the Restoration. Still, the old idea of unlimited royal power was never fully safe again. The conflict between king and parliament continued. Then, in 1688, another major event happened: the Glorious Revolution. King James II was removed from power. William and Mary became rulers, but they accepted limits on royal power. In 1689, the Bill of Rights strengthened Parliament's power and limited the power of the monarchy. This was extremely important. It helped create the idea of constitutional monarchy. A constitutional monarchy means the country has a king or queen, but their power is limited by law and parliament. This became one of Britain's most important political traditions. The king or queen would remain as a symbol, but Parliament would become the center of real political power. Then, in 1707, England and Scotland officially united through the Acts of Union. This created the Kingdom of Great Britain. This was a major turning point. England and Scotland had separate histories, separate identities, and sometimes conflict. But now they became part of one political union. Later, in 1801, Ireland was also joined to create the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Much later, most of Ireland became independent, and today the United Kingdom includes England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So Chapter 3 shows us a powerful transformation. Britain moved from medieval castles and feudal power toward law, parliament, monarchy with limits, religious change, national unity, and growing sea power. Britain was no longer only a land of tribes, kings, and castles. It was becoming a political system, a nation with parliament, a nation with strong ships, a nation with ambition, a nation ready to expand beyond its island. And this expansion would change the world. Chapter 4: Empire, Industrial Revolution, World Wars, and Modern Britain. After Britain became more united and powerful, it looked beyond its own island. The sea became Britain's road to the world. Ships carried traders, explorers, soldiers, settlers, missionaries, goods, ideas, and power. Britain slowly became one of the greatest naval powers in history. Its ships traveled to North America, the Caribbean, Africa, India, Asia, and the Pacific. This was the beginning of Britain's global empire. The British Empire became one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. At its height, Britain controlled or influenced lands across many continents. People often said, "The sun never sets in the British Empire." This meant the empire was so large that somewhere in the world, the sun was always shining on British-controlled land. But empire history is not simple. It has two sides. On one side, Britain spread language, law, railways, education systems, administration, trade networks, and new technologies in many places. English became a global language partly because of the British Empire. British-style government, courts, schools, and institutions influenced many countries. But on the other side, empire also brought exploitation, violence, racism, loss of freedom, economic control, cultural damage, and suffering. Many people in colonized lands did not choose British rule. They were controlled. Their resources were taken. Their economies were changed. Their people were often treated unfairly. So when we study the British Empire, we should not see it only as glory. And we should not see it only as one simple story. We must understand both power and pain, both achievement and injustice, both influence and resistance. One very important part of Britain's imperial history was India. The British East India Company first came for trade, but slowly, trade turned into political control. After battles, alliances, and expansion, the company controlled large parts of India. Later, after the revolt of 1857, the British Crown took direct control. India became one of the most important parts of the British Empire. India gave Britain wealth, soldiers, raw materials, markets, and strategic power. But British rule also caused deep suffering, economic exploitation, famines, and loss of political freedom. India's struggle for independence became one of the greatest freedom movements in history. This shows us something important. Empire creates power for the ruler, but it creates a deep desire for freedom among the ruled. And eventually, people fight to control their own future. While Britain was expanding overseas, something powerful was happening at home: the Industrial Revolution. This was one of the biggest changes in human history. Before the Industrial Revolution, most people worked in farming, small workshops, and hand production. But in the 18th and 19th centuries, machines changed everything. Factories appeared. Steam engines powered machines. Coal and iron became extremely important. Textile production grew. Railways were built. Cities expanded quickly. Britain became the first industrial nation. This gave Britain huge economic power. Factories produced goods faster. Railways moved people and products. Steamships improved trade. New inventions changed work, travel, communication, and daily life. Cities like Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Glasgow, and London grew rapidly. But the Industrial Revolution also had a dark side. Factory workers often worked long hours. Children worked in dangerous conditions. Cities became overcrowded. Air pollution increased. Many poor people lived in terrible housing. Life for working-class people could be extremely hard. So industrial progress created wealth, but it also created suffering. This led to new demands for reform. Workers wanted rights. People wanted better wages. Children needed protection. Cities needed sanitation. People demanded political representation. Slowly, Britain passed reforms. Factory laws improved conditions. Voting rights expanded. Public health improved. Education became more important. The country began changing from an aristocratic society into a more modern society. In the 19th century, Queen Victoria ruled for a long time. Her period is called the Victorian era. This was a time of empire, industry, science, invention, strict social values, literature, and major social change. Britain was powerful. London became one of the most important cities in the world. British ships controlled global trade routes. British factories produced goods for the world. British writers, scientists, engineers, and politicians shaped global thinking. But inequality still existed. Rich and poor lived very different lives. This is why Victorian Britain was both impressive and unequal. Then the 20th century arrived, and Britain faced two world wars. World War I began in 1914. Britain joined the war against Germany and its allies. Millions of soldiers fought in terrible conditions. Trenches, machine guns, gas, mud, fear, and death became symbols of the war. Many young men died. Families were broken. The war ended in 1918, but the cost was enormous. Britain won the war, but it was weakened. The country lost lives, money, and confidence. Then, only 2 decades later, World War II began. This war was even more destructive. Britain fought against Nazi Germany and its allies. In 1940, Britain faced one of its most dangerous moments. Germany had defeated many countries in Europe. Britain stood almost alone against Hitler. The Battle of Britain became a turning point. German aircraft attacked British cities and airfields. The British Royal Air Force fought back. Britain survived. During the war, London and other cities were bombed heavily. This period was called the Blitz. Ordinary people hid in shelters, families suffered, buildings were destroyed. But Britain continued fighting. The leadership of Winston Churchill became famous during this time. His speeches encouraged people to stay strong. World War II ended in 1945. Britain was on the winning side. But again, victory came with a huge cost. The country was tired. The economy was damaged. The empire was becoming harder to maintain. After the war, Britain changed again. One major change was the creation of the welfare state. The National Health Service, known as the NHS, was created in 1948. The idea was powerful. Healthcare should be available to people, not only to the rich. Britain also improved education, housing, and social support. This showed that after war, people wanted a fairer society. At the same time, the British Empire started to end. Countries across Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean demanded independence. India became independent in 1947. Many other countries followed. This process is called decolonization. Britain was no longer the empire it once was. It had to find a new identity, not as the ruler of a huge empire, but as a modern democratic country in a changing world. The 20th century also brought social changes inside Britain. Women gained more rights. Workers gained more rights. Immigration changed British society. People came from former colonies and other countries to live and work in Britain. This made Britain more multicultural. Different cultures, languages, foods, religions, and communities became part of modern British life. Britain also became famous for music, film, literature, fashion, sport, science, education, and media. From Shakespeare to the Beatles, from Newton to modern scientists, from parliamentary democracy to global English. Britain's cultural influence remained strong even after the empire declined. Today, Britain is a modern country with a long and complex history. It has a monarchy, but real political power belongs to Parliament and the elected government. It has old castles and modern cities. It has ancient traditions and modern diversity. It has proud achievements and painful historical questions. It has influence, but also challenges. Modern Britain faces issues like economic pressure, immigration debates, national identity, Scotland's future, relations with Europe, and the memory of empire. Britain left the European Union after Brexit, showing that its relationship with Europe is still a major question in modern politics. But whatever happens next, Britain's history remains deeply important. Because Britain helped shape the modern world in many ways. Through the English language, through Parliament, through law, through literature, through science, through industry, through empire, through war, through democracy, through culture. But this history also teaches us to think carefully. Power can build. Power can also destroy. Empire can spread influence. Empire can also create suffering. Industrial progress can create wealth. It can also create inequality. War can show courage. It can also show the terrible cost of human conflict. So the history of Britain is not only a story of success, it is a story of transformation, a story of struggle, a story of ambition, a story of mistakes, a story of invention, a story of power, a story of change. The history of Britain began with ancient people, forests, stone tools, and monuments like Stonehenge. Then came the Celts, then the Romans, then the Anglo-Saxons, then the Vikings, then the Normans, then medieval kings, Magna Carta, Parliament, religious change and national unity, then empire, industry, world wars, decolonization, and modern Britain. This small island changed the world. But it was also changed by the world. That is the beauty of history. No nation is created in one day. No country is shaped by one person. History is built by millions of lives, by farmers and soldiers, by kings and queens, by workers and writers, by rebels and reformers, by inventors and teachers, by ordinary people who lived, struggled, worked, dreamed, and changed the future without always knowing it. And this is why we study history, not only to remember dates, not only to remember battles, not only to remember rulers. We study history to understand humanity. We study history to understand how the world became what it is today. We study history to learn from success and mistakes. And we study history to become wiser. So if you watched till the end, you have not only learned the history of Britain, you have also practiced English through a powerful story. Keep learning, keep listening, keep improving. Because every story you understand makes your mind stronger. And every English lesson you practice brings you one step closer to confidence.